Hi, welcome to the Rewind the Timeline podcast, brought to you by thetimelinemachine.com. I am your host, the Timeline King. This is the podcast where we go back in time to take a look at all the pop culture anniversaries that have happened this past week. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the 10-year, 25-year, 35-year, 50-year anniversaries, and so on. We're going to be looking at the most popular film and television events and brands that happened during this time. So let's go take a look. This is episode 22 of this podcast, and for this episode, we will be looking at all the anniversaries that have happened from August 28th all the way until September 2nd, 2023. Let us begin. Before we begin with the anniversaries, I want to address a couple celebrity deaths that have happened this past week. First, we have the death of Arlene Sorkin, who was most famous for being the voice of and inspiration for Harley Quinn on Batman the Animated Series. Prior to Batman, Sorkin acted in Days of Our Lives, and there was an episode where she dressed as a court jester for a dream sequence. One of the creators of Batman the Animated Series, Paul Dini, was a fan and friend of Sorkin, so he created the character of Harley Quinn and based it on Sorkin's Days of Our Lives character. Now, Harley Quinn was never part of the original Batman comics, but her popularity in Batman the Animated Series led her to become like an important part of the Batman mythology moving forward, and we have to credit this actress for her part in Harley Quinn's creation. Sorkin sadly passed away on August 24th, 2023, at the age of 67 after a long battle with multiple sclerosis, but her creation will be remembered for decades to come. Rest in peace, Arlene Sorkin. Next is the death of Bob Barker, who died on August 26th, 2023. Bob Barker is a man who needs no introduction. He was most famous for being the host of The Price is Right from its inception in 1972 all the way until 2007. Prior to landing the Price is Right gig, he hosted another game show called Truth or Consequences for 18 years, from 1956 to 1972. With 51 years of being a game show host, Barker has a record that won't be broken for many years to come. One thing I've always loved about Barker was that he was like a pets' rights activist. He ended each episode of The Price is Right with the plea, help control the pet population, have your pets spayed or neutered. And these weren't just like meaningless words. Bob Barker like practiced what he preached. He was like a strict vegetarian for 45 years. He also straight up did not allow any like fur coats to be shown on the show. And Bob Barker retired from The Price is Right in 2007, and he got replaced by Drew Carey. I have to say that Drew Carey personally never did it for me as the host of Price is Right. I felt like he lacked any of the humor and charm that Bob Barker had on the show. And it's definitely safe to say that like Bob Barker was irreplaceable, and his presence on that show was always missed, and it will continue to be missed. And obviously, his death means that he will be missed in real life as well. So luckily, Bob Barker did live a long age. He had a happy life. He died at age 99 of natural causes. So he would have had his 100th birthday in December. Yeah, which is a shame that he was like so close and yet never got it. There's a joke going around the internet that Bob Barker lived as close to 100 without actually crossing it, and listening to that joke kind of like brings me some joy, because like the whole point of Price is Right was to get as close to 100 without actually crossing it when you spin the Price is Right wheel. So in a way, Bob Barker kind of like lived his life the same way he told his contestants to play his game show. Rest in peace, Bob Barker. So let's begin with the anniversaries now. First is August 28th. We begin with August 28th, 1898, 125 years ago, where we have the naming of Pepsi-Cola. Pepsi was actually invented in 1893 by a pharmacist in North Carolina called Caleb Bradham. At the time, it was simply known as Brad's Drink, but on this date in 1898, they rebranded itself as Pepsi-Cola. The name Pepsi comes from the disorder dyspepsia, which is like a form of indigestion, and it was said that this drink could cure that indigestion. So Pepsi was originally actually supposed to be healthy for you. So since it was made by a pharmacist, and it's crazy to think like how much the world has changed, right? If Pepsi is considered junk food now, or rather, we should just say how much Pepsi has changed. So happy 125 years to Pepsi-Cola. Next is 75 years ago, August 28th, 1948, we have the birth of author Vonda McIntyre. Vonda McIntyre is known mainly for her Star Trek novels. Her best known novel is Star Trek The Entropy Effect, which was released in 1981. Though this book is definitely non canon, it was, in fact, the first time that the names Hikaru Sulu and Nyota Uhura were used. Prior to that, the characters were simply known by their last names, Sulu and Uhura. The name Hikaru Sulu got canonized in the 1991 film Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and Nyota Uhura was later made canon in the 2009 Star Trek reboot. So we definitely have to honor the contributions McIntyre made to the Star Trek franchise. She also wrote a Star Wars novel at one point, Star Wars The Crystal Star, but the less said about this book, the better. This is actually considered to be one of the worst Star Wars books ever written, and a lot of the criticism comes from its use of like magic and the supernatural, so they're like werewolves and centaurs in this book. So it's as if like McIntyre did not know what franchise she was writing for. But I think we can ignore this like one bad hiccup, since like McIntyre has had a legacy of like great work to reflect on. Sadly, McIntyre died on April 1st, 2019 at the age of 70, but her contributions still live on in sci-fi. So today would have been her 75th birthday. Rest in peace. Next is 50 years. No, sorry. Next is 25 years ago, August 28th, 1998. We have the release of three movies. 54. This is centered around the rise and fall of Studio 54 in the 1970s and 80s. Then we have Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. This is another Guy Ritchie movie and the first feature film appearance of actors Jason Statham and Vinnie Jones. And we also have Why Do Fools Fall in Love, about a guy who married three women who all want a piece of real estate following his death. Happy 25th anniversary to all of these films. Now we go to August 29th. First is 25 years ago, August 29th, 1998, we have the premiere of the Disney Channel original movie Brink. I grew up watching a lot of the Disney Channel original movies, and this is definitely one of the ones that I remember was like constantly being played on television. So I got to watch this movie like several times. The story is about this high schooler named Andy Brinker. He goes by the nickname Brink. So Brink wants to be a professional skater, right? He practices it with his friends like every day after school. However, Brink and his friends don't want to be like the corporate sellouts who only skate for money. Brink and his friends like believe in soul skating, which is like skating for the love of it. However, like one day, Brink's family gets into financial hardships after his dad loses his job, so Brink feels that the only way to help his family is by joining the corporate sellouts and skating for money. This obviously puts him in hot water with his friends who don't like that Brink has sort of like gone to the dark side. The guy who was like preaching all the soul skating is now suddenly skating for money now. So Brink kind of has to decide like where his loyalties are. Is he loyal to his friends or is he loyal to his family? And and can he stay true to himself and his own morals while he tries to do that? So this is a Disney Channel movie, so you kind of like know how it'll go. But I will say that I enjoyed watching it. The movie also features Walter Emmanuel Jones, who most '90s kids will know as Zach Taylor from Power Rangers. Always liked this actor, and I wished he was in more stuff growing up. Happy 25 years to Brink. Next is 10 years ago. Technically, this is from August 29th, because it aired at like 11:30 p.m. on August 29th up until like August 30th, when at like 12:30 a.m. Of 2013. So we have the 20th. This is the 20th anniversary of Late Show with David Letterman. So this is the 20th anniversary episode of The Late Show. Okay, so this episode was notable because it had Bill Murray show up in a white Rolls Royce. while wearing a Liberace outfit. So Bill Murray was like Letterman's first guest when Late Show debuted in 1993, and he was also Letterman's first guest when he hosted Late Night all the way back in 1982. So I guess like this is a happy 10th anniversary to the 20th anniversary of Late Show with David Letterman. And I guess we're moving to August 30th now. So this is 75 years ago, August 30th, 1948. We have the birth of actor and comedian Louis Black in Washington, D.C. Louis Black does a lot of work for Comedy Central. He's been on all incarnations of The Daily Show. Little kids will probably know him for being the voice of Anger on Inside Out. He's expected to come back for the role in the upcoming Inside Out 2. Happy 75th birthday to Louis Black. Now we go to August 31st. First is 50 years ago, August 31st, 1973, we have the death of legendary film director John Ford in Palm Desert, California. Ford was 79 at the time, and in his career he directed over 150 movies and was seen as one of the best directors of all time. Ford received 6 Academy Award nominations, and he won 4 times for Best Director, so that's the most out of any director. He won for the films The Informer in 1935, The Grapes of Wrath in 1940, How Green Was My Valley in 1941, and The Quiet Man in 1952. Ford said that he didn't show up for his first 3 Oscars. He said for the first one he decided to go fishing instead. For the second one, there was a war going on, World War II. And for the third one, he just got drunk and he forgot. And it's only for The Quiet Man did he actually like show up for it in 1952. And aside from these films, like Ford was also known for his many westerns that he made. So he made a Stagecoach in 1939, My Darling Clementine in 1946, Fort Apache in 1948, The Searchers in 1956, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance in 1962. So Ford is considered one of the all-time greatest film directors, and his work went on to inspire like a lot of the other great directors that we know, like Orson Welles, Woody Allen, Akira Kurosawa. However, Ford himself was like much more humble about like his status as a director. He is quoted as saying, "I love movies, but I don't like talking about them," and also to be quite. He also said, to be quite blunt, I make pictures for money, to pay the rent. There's some great artists in the business. I am not one of them. The world would disagree, Mr. Ford. You know, your movies are still shown in film schools worldwide to this very day. Rest in peace. Also on August 31st, this is 25 years ago, August 31st, 1998, we have the premiere of Disney's Hercules. This is an animated series that is like sort of in continuity with the 1997 Disney film. I say sort of because this TV series is supposed to take place in the middle of the movie while Hercules is still in training with like Philoctetes. However, the movie also has Hercules interacting with Hades, even though Hades didn't even know that Hercules was still alive until after Hercules' training was complete. So the continuity is a little off, but it's probably better not to like think about it too much. The premise for this show is that Hercules is still a teenager and he's attending Prometheus Academy. His 2 best friends are Cassandra, who can like see the future, and Icarus, who flew too close to the sun and survived. Yeah. This series like kind of plays fast and loose with Greek mythology, and while also combining it with a lot of like the typical high school tropes that you would see. And but I thought it was a fun cartoon growing up, and I enjoyed watching it. Happy 25 years to Disney's Hercules. And we're finished with August now, so let's change the month to September. We begin with September 1st. This is 100 years ago, September 1st, 1923. We have the Great Kantō earthquake in Japan. This is considered to be one of the deadliest earthquakes to have ever hit the country. It was a 7.9 magnitude quake that caused damage to the Kanto region, including to the cities of like Tokyo and Yokohama. A lot of the buildings were destroyed, and because like many people were cooking at the time, a large number of fires like broke out. You also have to incorporate a lot of the violence and lootings that typically happens during like big tragic events like these. Take all that into account, and it's estimated that like 100,000 people died from like the earthquake and its after effects, and that makes it like one of the deadliest events in Japan's history. So much so that like Japan would later declare September 1st as Disaster Prevention Day. Yeah, a tragic event that will never be forgotten. Next is 35 years ago, September 1st, 1988. We have the publication of A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. This was one of Stephen Hawking's best selling books with over 25 million copies sold. A lot of it has to do with Hawking's writings, which appeal to anyone. With even a layman's understanding of physics. Hawking himself had like no formal education in physics, and yet in this book he was able to write about the structure, origin, and development of the universe. The only way as somebody with a 100+ IQ could do. And he broke down like what the universe was, what it was made out of, what the Big Bang and black holes were, and he just did it in like such a way that it's like very easy to grasp it, without knowing all these like sciencey terms. It's an interesting read for like anybody who wants to get introduced to these topics. Happy 35th anniversary to A Brief History of Time. Next is 25 years ago, September 1st, 1998, we have the release of Titanic on VHS. There's not much that I can say about Titanic that hasn't already been said. It was the highest grossing film ever when it came out, and it is still like the fourth highest grossing movie ever made. And it is no wonder that like the VHS of the highest grossing film would itself be breaking records. The Titanic VHS was released as part of like a 2 tape set, and everybody who grew up in the 90s remembers how the first tape ended. Well, then, I believe you may finally get your headlines, Mr. Ismay. As such a chilling moment in the movie, and even now, every time I watch the movie, whether it's in the theater or on DVD, I always think about switching tapes during that moment. It's just cemented in my head. Anyway, the Titanic VHS like eventually ended up being like the best-selling live-action VHS of all time, and the second best overall, only behind The Lion King. So since VHS tapes have gone the way of the dodo, I don't expect these records to ever be broken. Happy 25 years to the release of Titanic on VHS. Also, 25 years ago, again on September 1st, 1998, we have the premiere of The Wild Thornberrys on Nickelodeon. This was made by Klasky Csupo, the same studio who created Rugrats and Our Real Monsters. The main character of this show is Eliza Thornberry, who can talk to animals. She travels around the world with her family, the Thornberrys. Eliza's father, Nigel Thornberry, is something like the crocodile hunter or Jeff Corwin in that he hosts a nature show. So each episode is about the family in a different location as Eliza meets like various different animals and interacts with local cultures. It was honestly an interesting show that like struck a good balance between being like entertaining while also being educational. But I never really became a big fan of it like the way I was with like Rugrats or Our Real Monsters. And I found out that like Klasky Csupo originally envisioned this as like an adult animated series, something akin to like The Simpsons or Family Guy. If they ever make that version of The Wild Thornberrys, I would like to see that. Like, I think there would be so much potential for adult humor in a show like this. Maybe if the Rugrats revival does well, like somebody will bring this back as well, and they can do it that way. Happy 25 years to The Wild Thornberrys. And the same day that The Wild Thornberrys came out, September 1st, 1998, right after that, we had the premiere of the Nickelodeon TV series Cousin Skeeter. I remember really liking the show, so the show was like filled with human characters, right? All except for this like one puppet named Skeeter who was voiced by Bill Bellamy. So Skeeter is supposed to be like this weirdo cousin, right? They never actually address the fact that Skeeter is a puppet. The show pretty much ignores that. But a lot of the humor comes from like how Skeeter is just like weird and has a hard time fitting in with like his family. But it's a fun show from like what I remember, and I do recommend checking it out for anyone who's interested. It's also where Megan Good got her start. I don't think Cousin Skeeter is available on Paramount Plus, and maybe the reason is that it hasn't gone to streaming yet is because of like music rights. There definitely is like a hard thing to acquire for streaming for old shows. But if you can find the show, like be sure to check it out. Happy 25 years to Cousin Skeeter. Finally, we get to September 2nd. First is 100 years ago, September 2nd, 1923. We have the premiere of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, based on the 1831 novel by Victor Hugo. This movie had its premiere on this day at the Astor Theater in New York and would later be given a wide release on September 6th. This would become Universal Pictures' highest grossing film of 1923 and its most successful silent movie ever. The movie made like 3.5 million on a budget of 1 million, so it was definitely profitable for its time. And the movie is in the public domain now, so you can pretty much like find it anywhere. So happy 100 years to the 1923 version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Next is 50 years ago, September 2nd, 1973. We have the death of J.R.R. Tolkien, who died in Bournemouth, Hampshire, England, at the age of 81. Tolkien is someone who needs no introduction. He wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and even though he's been gone for 50 years, his work will still be talked about and celebrated for decades, maybe even centuries to come. Rest in peace, J.R.R. Tolkien. Next is 10 years ago, September 2nd, 2013, we have the death of Frederick Pohl, who passed away of respiratory failure in Palatine, Illinois at the age of 93. Pohl was an accomplished science fiction writer, and a lot of his most famous books, like The Age of the Pussyfoot, The Cool Worn Gem, are still in print today. Rest in peace, Frederick Pohl. Also 10 years ago, again on September 2nd, 2013, we have the premiere of Uncle Grandpa on Cartoon Network. This is such like a silly and weird show, and that is like really the reason that I love this. It feels a lot like what Cartoon Network was in the 90s, where like every episode was standalone with no like overarching plots or stories. You can literally tune into like a random episode of Uncle Grandpa and like never be confused. So if you're like a fan of SpongeBob, I would really recommend checking this out. It has the same kind of like wackiness that SpongeBob has, like multiplied by 10. Happy 10 years to Uncle Grandpa. Same day that Uncle Grandma premiered, also on September 2nd, 2013, we have the launch of the basic cable channel FXX. The network began with an all-day marathon of Parks and Recreation, and right away this is how you knew like FFX was going to be different from its parent channel FX. While FX was more about like playing dramas and dramatic movies, FXX was going to be more about like comedies. So the following year, they cemented that when FXX became the cable home to The Simpsons with their Every Simpsons Ever. Now, I have noticed another difference between FXX and normal FX, and that is that FXS has like much less censorship. A lot of the words in movies that might get like bleeped out on FX would be said normally on FXX. Now, too bad they never launched a third channel called FXXX. We all definitely would have liked to have seen that one. Happy 10 years to FXX. Lastly, for this episode, also on September 2nd, 2013, we have the debut of Cedric, the entertainer, as host for the TV show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. He replaced Meredith Vieira, who hosted the show for its first 11 seasons. Cedric himself didn't last that long as host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. He was only host for the show's 12th season. Before dropping out, he cited his like film and TV commitments. So Cedric got replaced by Terry Crews, who himself later got replaced with Chris Harrison. I don't remember Cedric's era of the show like being that distinctive or memorable. I don't really feel like he was a Bob Barker type, but I thought it was good for him to like try his talents at hosting, and I felt like on a normal day, like this guy's an excellent comedian. So. Happy 10 years to when Cedric the Entertainer began hosting Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And that's it for this week. Tune in next week for episode 23. Follow us on social media to keep up to date on all the latest anniversaries. We are on Facebook at The Timeline Machine and on Instagram at Waste My Time Machine. Also visit our website, thetimelinemachine.com, for more great content. And remember, keep rewinding the timeline. Bye.